Hi, I'm Chris Nesi from the House of Ed Tech podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to right now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey, welcome back. Steve here, and today I'm talking with Dr. Matthew Woods. He's an author, school system administrator, father, husband, and a podcaster. Today we're focused on his book, Leading Out the Woods, Nurturing School Etiquette for Success, and his podcast, Leading Out the Woods. And by the way, his children's book series, I Want to Be. What an awesome talk. You're going to love this episode. So much to learn. Thanks for listening. Oh, by the way, could you take a minute to help out the podcast? You know, there's a couple ways you could do that. One is share the links with a friend or two. Yeah, that'd be cool. You could stop by my website, stephenmiletto.com, and leave a review and subscribe. How about that? Yeah, that'd be cool. How about, finally, you could go to my website, click on the link, buy me a coffee, and donate $5. What do you think? That'd be so cool, because that'd help me deal with the different costs of producing the podcast. What do you think? You are awesome. Enjoy the show.
There are several, in my opinion. The first one is just a lack of consistent etiquette language. So language is very powerful because it gives us all common vocabulary, right? When I say jump, you know the action I intend for you to do. If I say an apple, you know the fruit or piece of fruit that comes to mind. So words have power. Language is power. But language cannot exist if we don't have the same vernacular. Like, we have to understand what the words mean, and they have to generate the same common understanding.
It's the Education Podcast, your favorite show, with lots of groovy guests and they share what they know. So crank it up to 10 and let your neighbors know that here's another show with Dr. Steve Miletto. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. With Dr. Steve Miletto.
Dr. Matthew Woods has served for more than 13 years assisting students, educators, and schools in a variety of roles. His professional experience includes being a high school social studies teacher, middle and high school assistant principal, middle school principal, director of student support services, assistant superintendent of student services, adjunct professor, and a field instructor for student teachers. Additionally, Dr. Woods hosts an education podcast called Leading Out the Woods and is an accomplished keynote speaker, educational consultant, and author. Dr. Woods has earned a BS in History and Social Studies from Ferrum College, M.Ed in Educational Leadership and Administration from Virginia Tech, Graduate Certificate in Education Law and Policy and Educational Specialist in Middle Grades Education from the University of Georgia. Hey, I like that. And an Ed.D in Educational Leadership and Administration from Radford University. Our focus will be Matthew's podcast, Leading Out the Woods, and his book, Leading Out the Woods, Nurturing School Etiquette for Success. Matt, thanks so much for being on the show, and say hi to everyone.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Hey, everybody. Stephen, like I said, thank you so much for letting me hop on here on your amazing show. Definitely a fan of your show and the work that you're doing. So when you reached out and extended the invitation for me to hop on here, I couldn't wait. So thank you again, brother.
Oh, glad to have you here. And I'm a fan of your show, and I enjoy, and I've enjoyed listening to what you're talking about and reading your the stuff you got going on the website. You got so much stuff going on, by the way, man. It's awesome. And, let's start with this. I mean, you've been an educator for a number of years. What is something that you like the most about being a social studies teacher?
Oh, taking it back to my roots.
Yeah.
For me, what was great about being a social studies teacher is that I had a strange affinity towards social studies and history. And I want to make sure for listeners out there is a difference between social studies and history. I'm going to let y'all figure that out yourself or go on Google, but there is a difference. And I had the opportunity really to dive into both. For the social studies side, I taught several sections of criminal justice. But then on the history side, I taught world history too. And I say all that to say, if we package it together, just say a social studies / history teacher, those topics, the big ideas always seem to click for me, Stephen, for some reason. I remember as a kid, I was like, oh, I understand the why why they're upset. I don't agree with the why, like why they're invading this country or want to, do all these, but those big concepts that I think sometimes that kids struggle with, and even adults, right? For me, for some reason, I felt like in my head, and even now, like these pieces just connect. But what never made sense to me, Stephen, which your mouth might drop when I tell you this, is I never understood why I had to memorize dates. And I used to ask my teachers, like, why do I need to memorize these dates? Well, these dates are important. Well, why? Well,
Nice.
Well, they're important. So any of my former teachers, I'm sorry for being that student. But where I'm going with it is, and this is something that I took with me when I became a social studies teacher, I would tell kids, think about segments of history, time periods. And if you can just remember certain things happen in certain time periods, quote unquote, when you get to, that good old fashioned test, typically you can automatically sort down to the answers, and you've either gotten it down to one or two, or you're like, what, all the other ones are so far off. This had to have happened in the 1500s. This couldn't have happened in like 1927 or whatever crazy date they're giving me. And I remember, even for me, and even now, like when certain things happen and people ask dates, that's actually how I start to think about, okay, when did this actually happen? And I could start narrowing it down on that. So I say all that to say, Stephen, I took all of those passions that I had related to the topic, and I tried to infuse that within my own instruction. And I would try to get my students to look at social studies and history through a very different lens, and really, appreciate it. Appreciate that when you are learning about social studies and how people interact in whatever the specific content is, you're getting a leg up. I used to tell the kids, like, you're getting a leg up from your parents, from me, because you're able to take things that have happened, interpret it in the present, and you're going to have an advantage. You're going to have an advantage over me. And then, then when you're, and I would tell them that's the main purpose behind it. You learn from other people's mistakes. You learn how to take that step forward earlier to minimize some of those struggles that you could go through if you didn't know about it. So, man, I could keep going on and on about it, but like I said, brother, love social studies. That was my passion, and I'm very fortunate that I had great teachers that encouraged me and inspired me to go into that topic.
That's awesome. And as I was a history teacher, now I taught a few social studies classes. Like I taught street law and Georgia history, which had a couple other classes attached to it. But there's a couple others. I think briefly I had a sociology class or something like this. But I was focused on history, and my favorites were U.S. and world, and I taught a lot of world. Those are my favorite. In Georgia, they were 10th graders taking world history, and 10th graders are a blast. They're my favorite grade to work with. Juniors are my next favorite, and then forget seniors. I try to go back the other direction. So
they've just checked out. They're like, I'm ready to go.
Yeah, it's like they know too much. They know everything. That's the whole point. So that's cool. Thanks for sharing that about social studies, and just sort of say, yeah, buddy. All right, so we're good. I like that. All right, so let's talk school for a minute. I mean, what do you think is something that puts a teacher at risk for getting burned out of the classroom today?
Man, that could have been our whole topic, right?
Yes.
There's so much. I think if I'm saying like the here and now, because I think
Yes.
for the listeners out there, there's a plethora of things. I think the first one to me is people not really understanding the state of education. Like you got to know what you're getting into right now. And I think that there's a mindset, and I hear people when they say it, and I think I know what their intentions, but I think sometimes they let it jade their reality, right? But this is what education's supposed to be.
Yeah,
you're right. You're right. It is. Kids are supposed to come to us knowing this stuff. They're supposed to come to us knowing how to act like this. I don't disagree. I'm 100% with you. But you know what? If you see some of the stuff that we're seeing now, We are in different times, right?
Yeah, we are.
Once again, there's a long laundry list of the whys behind that, and not pointing fingers and blame, but like I said, long list behind it. So I say to folks all the time, you have to know what you're getting into. That's the first thing. The second thing is you have to know how not to take it personal. And I had a mentor say this to me years ago, and it has served me to this day. It still hasn't let me down. They said, Matt, you're going to get in situations where kids are just going to just piss you off. Yes. Like something's going to happen and they're just going to make you mad. They're going to catch you on the wrong. It's the inevitable. It's going to happen. And people that know me know I'm usually upbeat, positive. So it takes a lot to really kind of get me in a bad, kind of get me off my A game per se. But they said, but the difference you have to keep in mind, that same kid that had attitude with you, or they got upset, or you feel that doesn't like you, 9 chances out of 10 the next day, it's going to roll off their sleeve. They're just going to be like, oh, okay, whatever. And they're not really going to hold a grudge. Adults hold grudges.
It's crazy, isn't it?
And I remember, and I remember the first time I kind of had like a situation with a student. Like I had these 2 kids. What did they get to arguing in class? They did something. It was like a boy and girl. They were going back and forth. And I was so mad because they disrupted this great lesson. I was like, y'all come with me. It was right as the bells were ringing. I was looking for the administrator. I was so mad. And I was mad because these were 2 very good kids, very good students. And I'm like, hey, I was just so bad. I felt like they just let me down because I had never had to raise my voice with them. Just great kids. So I think I was just more just upset because I expected better. So I remember the next day I was thinking like, oh man, I bet you they're mad. Cause I know I just looked upset. I'm about 6'4", I'm a big dude. So I know I'm staring at them, probably scared them half to death. They came in the next day as if nothing happened. They listened, they did what they were supposed to. And I'm still thinking like, y'all are about to get upset. Y'all about to have some, I'm gonna have to step, let me get ready to call for the administrator. And it was like nothing had happened. And I realized that, I'm walking in there with that intent, like something's going to happen. So that was one of the first times where I really had to reflect on what my mentor had said and think about, just let it roll off your sleeve. Today's a new day. We're just going to start in fresh. And I would say to you, Stephen, those 2 things, knowing what you're getting into, especially today's time, we talk about education. And just letting things, not taking it personal. I think if more teachers and even administrators did that, the chances of them getting so burnt out would greatly diminish and be greatly minimized to the extent.
That's cool advice right there, because that's that is a big part of it. One of the things that I'm fond of saying is, someone needs to be the adult, and it better be you. And it's like, because sometimes it's like, what are you holding a grudge for, man? I love what you said. They're not. Don't take it personal, man. That's not.
I'm just not taking it personal. Not taking it personal. And I would say too, Stephen, having kids now myself, I think it really hits home because I'm just like, it's gonna take. It takes too much effort to hold a grudge. And then it also takes too much effort for me to be upset. It's easier for me to be happy and try to find the good. It's really intent for me to be like, I am so mad. Like, I hate you. Like, I don't know, man. I guess my mid-30s is starting to wear me. I'm just like, I just don't have the capacity for it.
I love it though. That's awesome. I mean, it's, when I was a history teacher, I was in a school where they had brought middle school concepts up to the 9th and 10th grade in the high school. And so we met. So when, as a parent, if you wanted to meet with the teacher on team, you actually met with the whole team. Some parents like that, some not so much. But the math teacher in this case had made somebody really mad, and they only wanted to meet with her, but it was, what we did, you met with everybody. And I stupidly opened my mouth during this meeting because I was like, she could get herself in trouble, but at the same time, I thought this time, this is, I can say something that will support. That was the wrong thing to do. But the parent said something to me that I'll never forget. She said, you don't understand, you don't have children, because that was before I had children. And I've always remembered that because once I had children, yeah, I get some of that. You know? Good stuff. All right. All right. I got another situational type question here. If you had a chance to talk with an auditorium full of first-time school principals, what is some advice about being successful in their first year that you would want them to remember when they left your talk?
I would say to them, listen to listen. Listen to what people are saying. Really turn an antenna, because I think we talked a little bit about some stuff before we recorded. And a lot of times people will tell you what they want, but then they really don't know what they want. Then they start talking in circles, or they're adding too much fluff. So really listening in to be like, okay, what exactly really is the problem that you're asking me, right? And then showing people that you have made steps to address it. I think there's too many times, especially as leaders, as administrators, we get tasked with a lot. You know, I tell people, and I say this all the time, the difference between a teacher and an administrator. 90% of people can tell you what a teacher does to a T. Most people can tell you, well, a teacher does da 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 da. Like even if they really don't know what it's called, they're like, a teacher teaches. They do instruction. Right. They have to stand in the hallway. They stand at the bus duty. I see them at games. Like people can start blurting stuff off what a teacher does. Administrator is very different, and that can be good and bad, because sometimes it become the worst, or we become our own worst enemy. Excuse me. Because we're responsible for so many things. It's almost like a lot of times we're the puppeteer. We're the ones guiding the implementation of policies. We're the ones putting these processes and procedures in place. So you see those teachers at those events, at bus duty, at game duty, addressing things, teaching you the proper curriculum, using the correct instructional strategies. Like people just don't see that. Right? So they're like, I think Stephen's doing something, but he ain't really doing it. He just overpaid. Right?
Right.
So I tell principals, you have to help yourself by when people are telling you. Now, it doesn't mean you go out and say, hey, Stephen, remember that issue you told me? I solved it. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, as people bring you things, you are in communication. Hey, I am doing my best to address this. Hey, I couldn't get any traction for it, but I want you to know I had reached out, I had attempted to do and da 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 da. Because a lot of times because then people know, you know what, Stephen actually listened to me. He actually took the opportunity to hear what I said, and he just tried. Like, he didn't get traction, right? Because in this case, Stephen, you dropped the ball on it. You didn't address the issue, but you tried. And I think too many times people are actually doing this, especially principals, and Lord knows first-year principals who they're like, hey, I'm trying to build a master schedule. I'm trying to build these relationships, do all this stuff, and it gets lost in the fluff. So I'll tell your listeners this, and I tell for principals, for new coordinators, for anyone who is in a leadership role within a school or school system. I use these 3 questions in all my roles I've transitioned to. I set up as many one-on-one meetings as I can, and I say, okay, Stephen, what can I do to help you? What is something you want me to honor, and if all possible, not change? What is the biggest concern or issue that I need to be aware of? I ask people those 3 questions. Not only do I ask those questions, I usually have a Excel spreadsheet. I type your name, I have the questions at the top. I actually write down what they tell me. Then from there, I am very strategic in going after those 3 things. So people who worked with me, when I've been in a leadership capacity, they know, like, I put those down, but I'm very intentional off the rip that I am going to try to do what I can to address those things. And even if I can't address it, I'm going to come back to you and say, hey, this is kind of outside my wheelhouse, but I want you to know I had spoke to the HR director about this. Hey, I reached out to Steven, the assistant suit, because I know what the new program they're coming out, but he's giving me some backstory on it. I don't know if you're aware of it, but hey, we're going to work through this together. And I'm going to see what I can do. But I do that on purpose just to set the stage. Hey, he's actually taking the opportunity not only to listen to what I'm saying, but man, he's following up like that. That's how you build immediate relationships. So for all the principals out there, if you do that for your staff, and it sounds like a lot, but speaking as a former principal myself, I just set up short 15-minute conversations with everybody with those 3 questions. Then as I got into things that were very niche, like, okay, this isn't really a big school thing. This is something Steven needs. If I couldn't address it, if I had assistant principals, I'd push it off to them. And then you follow up with me so we can follow up with Steven. And right there, especially for all the first-time folks, you will get so much positivity thrown your way if you just listen to listen, usually have some guiding questions like that, but most importantly, and not even just with these questions, but as people bring things to you, you're staying in constant communication and just customer service. Hey, I'm trying to make traction on this, or hey, I was able to get Steven to follow up with you on this. Like just doing those things so folks can see and feel, hey, I'm being heard, and that I'm seeing that movement on the work that we're trying to do.
That's awesome. I love it. This is good stuff. And when you're a first-year principal, there's nothing like that job, especially the first time you do it, because one of the things you talk about is that going from a classroom teacher to an administrator is an interesting shift. And then though, going from that assistant principal or whatever that other administrator position is to a principal is the next interesting shift. And
Yes.
Suddenly
Yes.
all those things that you said, I could do that, they all come at you at once. All right, do it now. Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Love your advice. Love it. All right, let's start taking a look at what Matt does. All right, so when someone stops by your website, in the middle of the page, just below your caricature, very nice by the way, you're welcome. There's a section titled "How Matthew Can Help You." Let's talk about how you can help educators, because you got a couple little things that you have them click on right there.
Sure. So if you go to my website, I'm very process and procedure driven. And I always tell people, when you have processes in place and procedures, it helps it helps guide people's thinking, and it's very methodical. So like for me, if you go on my website, like you mentioned, you'll see four categories. You'll see operational and management support, teacher and administrator coaching, curriculum and development, and assessment building. So different professional developments that I offer, different times that I've spoken in a variety of conferences, variety of schools, variety of districts, times I've been brought in to work with people in a variety of capacities and roles. They all, whatever I'm doing, falls under one of those four categories. Am I providing operational and management support? So am I doing something to help you think very methodically about the work that you're doing? So kind of going to the question you said earlier, hey, Matt, what was some advice you give first-year principals? That's operational support. I'm showing you how to walk in the door, support your staff, but you're doing it in a very qualitative way, because they can feel that quality, because you're asking condensed questions, very right to the point, and you're able to show feedback on it, turnaround, instead of just saying, I pulled your instructional data and it said you need to do da-da-da. And that stuff is important too, right? But you have that kind of support. When we talk about assessment building, okay, having people think about whatever it is you're teaching or you're doing, how do you know it's working? And people that know that work with me, that are around me, they know that is my like claim to fame. Like, how do you know this is working? Well, I feel good. Well, I feel good too. I got up this morning, I went to the gym, I ate my omelet. Great. We all feel great. But how do I know I'm feeling good? Did the doctor assess me? Did I get a good physical? Like sometimes folks, they make assumptions, and it's easy to do, right? Because we're in such an amazing profession where we get to work with kids, where we get to work with a variety of people. So you're going to feel good. People are happy. They're, oh my God, look, the kids are smiling. They're learning. Oh, the baby. But are they actually learning? Okay, they smiling in class. What did they get on that test? Okay, let's talk about that. Let's look at the data. So, for me, that's when I'm saying assessment building. I've helped folks from how we do, your formative checks all the way up to summative checks, depending on when I've worked with, like, for example, charter schools, when they've been trying to build out some type of assessment program, to some of our more traditional schools where they're just like, hey, I just need you to provide professional development and support on teachers understanding the components of high quality assessments, right? So assessment building, curriculum development, really getting people to look at their standards, right? Doesn't matter what state you're in, you have governing standards. Listeners out there, whatever state you're in, there is a governing standard from your respective department of education for the state. So for any state department out there that's listening, you don't have to give me props for giving y'all a shout out. I'm just doing it for the love of education. But you got your guidance standards, right? But the standards aren't the curriculum. Like, the standard is just telling me I need to take kids here. And that needs to be the minimum what I cover. So how I get there and how I choose to exceed it, my curriculum can open that up and can be my map for that. That standard is my, like, North Star that's guiding me. So I've been brought in a variety of different things to do that. A lot of times, a lot of clients have reached out to me, Stephen, transparency, about how they can take something they're doing and tie it into what we need to do.
That's cool.
With this after school, or we're trying to do this, but it needs to fit into their math initiative or their English. Can you help me look at this, these standards make sense, right? And then the coaching piece, teacher, administrator, coach. To me, all three of those can really kind of fall into that bucket. But I love coaching people, but coaching is very different than supervising. You can supervise and coach aspects, but it's hard to coach and say you're supervising. And I'd say to folks, you have to really kind of read between the lines, because coaching is bringing you along the journey, but the supervision part comes in where then it's like that accountability piece. So now I'm really kind of checking, hey, did you meet X, Y, Z? So I say to folks, even though in a lot of my professional roles, I am a supervisor, right? When I've been assistant principal, principal, director, assistant, those are very much supervisory positions. Even when I'm coaching people in the background too, at the end of the day, it's like, Dr. Woods, supervisor, right? In this type of capacity, I'm able to provide a lot of support to people, Stephen, but do it in a way where I can say, hey, we're going to talk about whatever it is, right? Like I had somebody recently, they reached out, they need help building a master schedule. Right. For all my principals out there, we all know about the master schedule.
Nice.
And it was a high school principal too. So especially for my high school people, that master schedule is just a whole different animal.
You got that right.
And I was talking to the person and I was walking them through, and we were building out their singletons and trying to figure out their course sequence, and I think they used Power School. So I was like, all right, pull a power, I was kind of walking them through, helping them how to do it. And I remember saying to them, I said, now I'm going to pause for a second. So now as an administrator, Well, at the division level, these are the non-negotiables I'm expecting to see. Right. And I was walking the person through because they had kind of said, hey, my director and assistant suit, Dr. Woods, had said they want da da da. And I said, yeah. So what they were saying is when you go to that meeting with your head counselor, they're expecting those numbers. Because when you go to that meeting right there, what they're really saying is, I need your hard count. But now I need to know how many teachers you're saying you need for those sections. And if I need to make decisions on hiring or possibly moving a teacher from this school to this school. So I love the coaching piece because I'm able to jump back and forth and explain to people like, hey, I'm helping you through this, but now I'm going to put on my different hat and explain to you that if we fast forward, if this was during the day and we're working together, this is what the intent behind that email, that meeting, that message. So yeah, those are my 4 things, man.
Awesome. And it's just, and I really like the way it's laid out and so forth to be able to find out more information. So it works really well. But thanks for talking about that. All right, so let's shift gears for a minute here. You produce a podcast. I love it. I'm a subscriber. It's called Leading Out the Woods. I like the little play on the words there.
Thank you.
And why'd you create the show?
Man, so back in the day, God, I'm saying now, I'm sounding older. Back in the day when I was in grad school at University of Georgia.
Nice, go Dogs.
So I know you down there in Georgia. There was a buddy of mine that he sworn me to secrecy because I used to drop his name all the time. He told me to stop. But I had a colleague who we would kind of chat in between classes, in between the professors, and he always would make fun of my accent. Was, oh man, you're so country. Da da da. And I'm like, dude, we're in Georgia, but he was from northern area, and he just laughed at my accent, and he had a running joke. He's like, man, you're always just leading out the woods, and it just kind of stuck. I was like, man, I like that. That kind of cool. Sounds kind of good. So I remember him and another one of my buddies like, hey man, you've just got a good lens through stuff. You should write a blog. Like, man, I'm too busy writing a blog. I ain't writing no blog. I already got all these papers for graduate school. Last thing I'm gonna do is go back to my apartment, write a blog. So fast forward several years. I'm a middle school principal. I think was it March 13th? Was it March 13th when everything shut down? I think it was March 13th when the governor
that year
shut everything down.
That year.
There we go. That year.
Oh.
So fast forward, schools get shut down. No playbook, right?
Right.
Fast forward a couple months, everything's still closed down. We're all just trying to figure out like there is no journal, there is no article. Remember, we're history people. There is no history to talk about what to do. So lo and behold, I started diving into more on Twitter, more on podcasts, more on Zoom, because now people were being very intentional about connecting with people virtually, right? So I'm talking to other principals. Hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? Man, like, is your division saying you got to keep 6 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet away? Like, are y'all open? Are we go? So there's more of these kind of interactions, right? And I started listening more to podcasts. And I'm like, man, this is pretty good. Like, okay. So I'm talking to, once again, some of my buddies, and they're like, Matt, you got a lot of great connections. You know a lot of different people. Because I'm telling them, hey, my buddy so said this, so and so, man. How do you know these people? Just from different. And they're like, it would be dope if you could just get them to share out some of their wisdom. Because some of these people cost buku's amount of money, if we're being transparent, to bring them into schools, to get them here. They're so busy. And man, if you could just get little clips from them, Matt, that would be so dope. So I would never forget, Stephen, that weekend, I learned how to do a podcast.
Nice.
I just started reading. I watched a couple YouTube clips on it. I'm like, okay, what do I need? Okay, you need a cool logo. Okay, I knew somebody. Okay, a lot of podcasts, they got a nice little jingle or little music. I knew my former music teacher. I said, hey, can you come up with a dope soundtrack for me that I can use for, this would be really cool. Okay. Got that. Okay. The first couple, I think, episodes, I just did my own little self reflections. And then I had reached out to enough people to start that guest log. And I'll be honest, that's really how it generated. And I just started pushing them out. And I tell folks this as encouragement. First couple podcasts pushed out, I ain't gonna lie, I might have had like 5 lists. It might have been me, my mom, my dad, my wife,
Nice.
maybe a friend who felt sorry for me, right? I'm just not even gonna lie. I'm just not even gonna lie.
Gotta love that.
And over time, I was like, man, I'm up to 20. Hey, man, I'm up to 50. Hey, I'm up to 100. Hey, I'm up to, okay. And this is like how many listeners a week. And I was like, I'm actually getting pretty good at this. Like, or then people are reaching out, hey, Dr. Woods, have you spoken to be great on your show? You need to look at them. Hey, I'm going to link you with this person. So it really manifested itself into what it's, to be honest, like what it's become now. It's like it is kind of grown, and you fast forward now, what, 4 years? Yeah, 4 years now, over 100+ episodes. It's really amazing, and it's definitely a testament to people listening to the podcast, like yourself, appreciating the content and giving me a lot of feedback for different people to listen, for different people to bring on, for different topics to expand on. And yeah, man, we're trying to make it to 200+. Keep it going.
Keep at it. It's on its way. It's around the corner. So good stuff. That's and
Yeah.
kudos on that. And it's an awesome podcast. You got great guests, and you talk about great stuff, and I enjoy it thoroughly. And something you introduced recently is something you call it Anchor Chats. Tell everybody about Anchor Chats and what you're trying to do there.
So the Anchor Chat came from listeners on Leading Up the Woods who had reached out, and several listeners, and they're just like, hey, Dr. Woods, you got great guests, great topics. What are some professional development opportunities you would recommend? And I said, well, it kind of depends on what you need. If you're listening to something you think you got a need for it, I mean, like that's kind of probably what you might want to get professional development on. So I remember I would get those type of questions, and I was trying to remember, listen to like really kind of understand what exactly are they asking, because it's hard for me to really say like what kind of professional development you need, because I really don't have enough to go by, right? So what came out of that was the Anchor Chats. And I said, okay, what my interpretation of what folks are saying is that when they're listening to different things, they can hear the need, right? When I have some of these guests on it, they can hear, hey, this is great, I need to do this. But they're still trying to figure out where exactly do I plug in on that. So what I did with the Anchor Chats is I kind of flipped the whole notion of doing what I call these 8 to 10, 8 to 12 minute small video, audio conversations. Just me, no guest on this. But I talk about different topics and why it's important to know about it, or why it's important that you should be aware of it. So I don't really tell you all the answers, right? Like I just tell you enough to say, like, within education, this is why this is important. So I'll give you an example. So, and I'm not sure, I should have probably asked you this, embarrassing, when this episode will go up, but like the current Anchor Chat at the time that's going up as we're doing, you're a recorder for this, is called Dressing for Success. And it's me talking about the whole concept of how when educators dress for success, the impact that it has on your school community, and it does, right? I know we're in an era where, I don't really want to wear a suit every day, Dr. Woods. I want to wear a t-shirt. Okay, you can in some cases, but I know as a guy, and I know Stephen, you'll appreciate this too, being in schools, we're very rare for kids, and especially if you're talking about elementary, middle school level. You really don't see that many men. So I know for me, I'm very intentional about what I wear and how I dress when I'm around kids, because folks say to me all the time, and it doesn't matter what school I'm in. I've had the opportunity and the blessing to work in several different divisions, or even when I'm traveling and consulting in different. I think I just came back from Wisconsin a little while ago. Shout out Green Bay. And people will always stop me and make note of that. Hey, young man, you dress very nice. And I love when they call me young. So thank y'all. Thank y'all. They're like, young man, you dress very, very nice, very sharp. Or kids need to see this. And I tell people all the time, it doesn't matter where I go, people say that. But what that shows me, and what I say to educators all the time, think about where that's actually coming from. It's coming from the fact people are really implying they don't see that much.
Right.
Especially if you are an African-American male. Because then people say, so what exactly do you do? You're a doctor? Wow. What exactly? I tell people all the time, I get it all the time. So to me, I'm very intentional about what I put on and how I dress when I'm around kids and other educators, because I always think about sometimes when I'm walking through hallways, when I'm visiting classrooms, when I'm talking to people, they might not see someone presentable like that all the time. And that's very powerful. So long story short, on that anchor chat, I talk about some of those reasons for dressing for success and really getting people to understand, how you dress does play a factor in your interactions with kids. How you carry yourself, if you feel positive, you feel, man, I feel good, man, I look good, I feel good walking out the door, you're going to teach better. You're going to lead better. It is going to happen. Why? Because you feel good. You are going out there with the right mindset. So I don't want to give too much away about that episode, because after people listen to this episode, they should go over there and listen to it. But yeah, in a nutshell, those are some of the things that we do on the anchor chats. And yeah, they've been very good as well, with subscribers going back and forth. So definitely appreciate the love.
Very cool, and very neat topic right there. And you'll be going live next week, so if the timing works out there, that'd be cool. So
perfect,
excellent. So good stuff, and keep producing the shows. They're awesome. All right, so I got. Let's talk about this. You've recently released your book, Leading Out the Woods: Nurturing School Etiquette for Success. So what do you mean by school etiquette?
School etiquette is the way in which we want kids to act when they're in school, because etiquette is really in the Bible, and it really depends on where you're at. But at the same time, it also signifies a certain standard that you expect, right? Like when you go into certain arenas, you expect a level of professionalism. You expect a level of respect. However, within schools, because we all know schools can be messy places, we have a lot of different kids, a lot of different cultures, a lot of different backgrounds. So it's very hard to just say, you kids need to be respectful. Well, what does respect mean? Have we defined respect? Okay, now we've defined respect, but we all have different definitions. But in school, we need a common definition of respect, because we're all in this common area together. So that is a big chunk of what the book talks about, making sure that administrators and teachers have really reflected on, one, what they intend to do, what they mean to do, and how they carry out those actions as it regards to the etiquette of kids in the school. So yeah, I mean, that in a nutshell is really the book, and I go through it very methodically in getting people to self-reflect on what they mean by some of these words. I talk about those key terms, and give a very guiding definition of all those terms. So to give people the idea, I'm talking about the 36 key terms of school etiquette. There are certain terms that it doesn't matter what code of conduct you look at, essentially, knock on wood, in any school district, pretty much in any state. There are certain words that are going to come up. Now, you might say, well, what words are you talking about, Dr. Woods? Sure. Respect, defiance, insubordination, professionalism, bullying, harassment. For the listeners out there, there's a difference between bullying and harassment, but I'll let you read the book if you don't know. But there are a lot of different terms out there that get used all the time in schools, and they get used on kids. But what I've found is that as educators, a lot of times we're unclear with what we're talking about. So then I'm like, how are we getting mad at the kids when we don't even know what we're talking about? So now everybody's just confused. So I'll give you one quick example. So part of the book talks about, and it actually pulls from when I've done professional development on these things. So in the book, you'll actually, I think if I'm sorry, you'll actually see pictures of some of the slides that I've done in some of my presentations. But I have one where I talk about making sure people understand the words. And for example, I say, well, let's talk about, I think it's defiance and insubordination. Do you know the difference between being defiant, or pretty much, sorry, being defiant and insubordinate? Most people can't tell you the difference. I do this all the time around the country, different folks, and I work with amazing, smart people. And I say this all the time, it's nothing but love. But it really gets people just to stop and think, are you clear on these words? Because, you know, when you're saying this kid's being defiant, this kid's being insubordinate, okay, well, which one is it? Because, you know, being defiant, they're just not following rules, but being insubordinate is not following the rules of an authoritative person or authoritative figure. Well, Dr. Woods, that's what I meant. Okay, well, who is an authoritative figure in your school? Teachers and administrators. It's not the custodians? Oh, no, they're authoritative figure. Not the secretary up front? The kid came in there and smacked the phone book off? They don't have to follow their rules? No, that's what I meant. Well, no, you just told me that those were your authority figures. So usually when I use that protocol to give you an idea, it really gets people to stop and think, okay, we just need to recalibrate. We need to make sure we're all on the same page, because now when you get to the part about teaching kids what those words mean, and when you're saying, okay, Stephen, you're being insubordinate, this is why. And we go through it. Now Stephen really understands what I'm talking about. Now he understands I'm not only respecting the teachers and administrators, but that includes the custodians, the secretary, the cafeteria folks, except whoever you're saying that's in that bucket, right? Now I can get real traction with kids, because now kids know exactly what I mean and what the intentions behind those words. So yeah, that's kind of where the book starts, as you know. And then, yeah, we just kind of start rocking and rolling from there. And yeah, the feedback about the book has been amazing. And it's spawned into a lot of different resources from the books, from, you know, the flashcards, the posters, the etiquette lesson plans, you name it. We've got a lot of resources that have stemmed out of it because of the feedback and the positivity from it.
I love it. It's an awesome book. And your whole focus on the etiquette and the keywords. I love this. You know, one of the things you talk about in the book is that proper etiquette is intertwined with effective instruction. What do you mean?
So when you think about, and I tell people, think about discipline through the lens of instruction. And I tell people this all the time, like, if you think about the word discipline, people are like, well, I know what discipline is. And I ask this one all the time. So what does discipline mean? And people are like, oh, discipline, you do something wrong, you get consequences. Okay. But there's another part of that definition that people leave out all the time. When it talks about a branch of knowledge. So when you hear people say, I'm going to school, I'm learning this discipline. And folks are like, oh, yeah, I've heard that. They're telling you the second part of the definition, folks. Go with me right now, right? So when you say discipline, I always say to folks, the consequence part is easy. Like, all right, you're going to get a consequence for it. But what am I teaching you to show you the error in your ways and to hopefully minimize this from occurring again? So me just saying, Steven, stop running down the hallway. That's not teaching you nothing. That's not teaching you anything. Or next time you and Matt get into a fight, you're getting suspended 10 days. That ain't teaching nobody nothing. Like I tell people all the time, if that works, we wouldn't have people in jail. Like, all right, there's more to it. Now, if I'm starting to show you what these words mean, how they're applied, and how within this structure that we call a school, that we call a classroom, that we call a hallway, the bathroom, how we have to interact with each other, right? How we have to have that proper etiquette in these spaces. Okay, now I'm starting to get traction with you. Now, will that prevent all discipline issues and things from happening? No, that is not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that most of the time when you have all of these issues and you start polling kids and you start polling educators, some of the proper etiquette things that need to be in place, people can't tell you. People can't explain to you the why behind why we do these processes and procedures. People can't explain what these words mean. They can tell you what they want you to do, but they can't explain how we get to what you want them to do. So it's just like effective instruction. I can stand up and say, I know everything about World History 2, blah, 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 this is what you need to do. But that's not good instruction. Good instruction is where I take the information, maybe that I know or that's in the book, and then I make sure the kids get it. I tell teachers all the time, that's the job. The job is to take what you know and get it in the baby's hands, and they can regurgitate it. That's effective instruction. Not that you can tell me you got a PhD and that you got 100 on all your quizzes. That's not what the intent is. The intent is for you to take what you know, get it into them, and most importantly, they can regurgitate it. Discipline is no different. We have to be calibrated on proper etiquette, what we want to see, those expectations. Then we have to teach that to the kids to establish that in those spaces.
Love it. This is, it's such a big part of what we do if we understand these words and if we understand how it interacts with what we do in our day and so forth. And I love that very much. It's really cool what you're focused on. One of the things that I'd like you to talk about is some of the barriers that exist to implementing school etiquette expectations. What do you think that is? Or are?
Well, there are several, in my opinion. The first one is just a lack of consistent etiquette language. So language is very powerful because it gives us all common vocabulary, right? When I say jump, you know the action I intend for you to do. If I say an apple, you know the fruit or piece of fruit that comes to mind. So words have power. Language is power. But language cannot exist if we don't have the same vernacular. Like, we have to understand what the words mean, and they have to generate the same common understanding. So the barriers typically are a lack of consistent etiquette language. That is always, to me, one of the biggies. there is a lot, and I think I misspoke. I think I said 36 key terms earlier. I meant to say 26 because there's 26 key terms, excuse me. So I apologize to the listeners. Typically, those 26 key terms are very universal, like I said earlier, in any code of conduct, any type of discipline manual. Even, and I say this to folks, I even do professional development and have trainings with daycares and early childhood centers. And they're telling the little babies, y'all don't need to be biting. Stop it. It's nice, like, hey, everybody's saying the same thing. Everybody's saying the same thing that they want kids to do, right? So getting calibrated on those terms, but then thinking about the what I call the web of connectivity, which is how discipline policies and systems all interact, and people understanding how they all interact, but then where do you fit? Like, for example, when we talk about policies are governing how those systems are created, right? And they're dictated. Now, you might not be a policy maker, because that's really for what? Like, if we're talking about like our administrators, let's say our school boards, things like that. But if I know that policy is out there, then I'm starting to really understand how it's dictating this system that I'm in, which I call a school. I'm starting to understand how it's dictating the type of rules I put in place and the why behind them. So then in turn, my discipline practices are feeding off of it, because I won't have discipline practices without certain systems. And I can't have certain systems without certain policies being put in place. And then those policies, by virtue, are dictating the type of discipline practices that I put in place, which are being carried out by the systems. And you can just kind of then start to see that web of connectivity that, like, okay, now I'm seeing the big picture. All I need to start thinking about is where I plug into it and understanding, because from there, that is how administrators and teachers and even community members can really have common language about things, because now I see why kids are doing these things. Is my policy inhibiting that type of behavior, or God forbid, is the policy actually contributing to those systems that is giving me those discipline issues? And y'all, I'm gonna tell you, when I do comprehensive needs assessments with folks, I've discovered policies before where folks don't even realize, hey, you had the right intentions, but look at what it's causing people to do. You intended it to do this, but the systems they're carrying out might be a lack of interpretation of the policy. It could be that they're putting the policy in place the way it was intended, but it's not getting you those results. So when everyone then sees that big web, now we can go, okay, now we can all have a very clear, transparent conversation about next steps.
Awesome. Love it. So, Matt, why should an educator read your book, Leading Out of the Woods, Nurturing School Etiquette for Success?
I would say you should read the book if you want to ensure that you are setting yourself up for success to have high quality instruction. You can't have high quality instruction if there's no discipline and there's no order. You have to have certain processes and procedures in place to then do the work, to then be an instructional leader, to be a high quality teacher, to ensure that students are learning what they are supposed to. But you can't do that if you don't have proper etiquette. You can't do that if you don't have a very safe space for kids. You can't do that if I'm a kid and I'm too busy worrying about what did they mean when I'm in the classroom. Like, what does this rule mean? What they're saying I need to do this, but they meant that, and I think they meant this. Like there's too much chaos going on. When we have that order there, then I can do high quality instruction. I could get kids rocking and rolling and learning. So I would say if that's the intent that you're trying to do, I definitely encourage you to read the book. It is definitely written for practitioners. I don't sugarcoat it. The first draft of the book was about 170 pages. And shout out to everybody who read it beforehand. They said, Matt, this is a great book. But listen, I'm teaching all day. I'm an administrator. Man, I ain't got time to read more than 100 pages, 110 pages. I know what MTSS is, multi-tiered system support. I don't need you to give me all the research behind MTSS. I can read something else for that. If I'm reading this, I'm the principal or whoever talk about it. I just need to know how to implement MTSS. So I took all that feedback and said, you know what? Let me go back to the drawing board. I was able to, believe it or not, y'all, skim the book down to right under 100 pages.
Nice.
It's a very easy read. It's very practical. And most importantly, it has action steps that you can do immediately. And that, to me, Stephen, is the greatest feedback. When folks are like, hey, Matt, I literally took your book, started a book study in whatever capacity I'm in, or I just applied it myself, and I've seen traction. I've gotten that from classroom teachers who said, hey, man, I just took the book, just do it myself. I've got it from departments where they're like, hey, we wanted to implement this. I've got it from building leaders who said, hey, we're trying this for a whole building. Got it from division folks who said, hey, as a division, this is what we're trying to do. And it really feels good because it validates not only the work that I've done, but it validates the fact that when kids just have clear expectations and the people who are giving them the expectations are clear, that kids can do amazing things. And that even the kids that folks will write off sometimes, right? Or the people who think like, oh, these kids can't learn, this is a bad school, these are bad kids. That when everybody is on the right page, that people are starting to see that magic happen and they're starting to see those results. So that's, to me, the importance of the book. I appreciate the feedback I get about the book. And just like I said, I can't encourage it enough for folks to check it out.
Awesome. Great information and just great ideas that you're providing in your book. And I encourage everyone to read. Good stuff. All right. So before we leave, I got to make sure I say this because you have something else on your website and you have other books that you've created. And one of the series of books that you've created is called I Want to Be. Care to share about this? Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the book I Want to Be is about my son, or my son is the main character in the book, or in the series of books, excuse me. So where the series came from is my son is I'm biracial. I'm Black. For the listeners, can't see me. I'm Black. My wife is white. And what we noticed is that it got really hard, Stephen, finding books that really kind of reflected our family, right? That really kind of gave a very positive image or example of our family. And I remember how much it bothered me and my wife because, it's like you think about those things, and I say this to folks all the time, but you really don't think about certain things until you're actually kind of experiencing. Like when you're starting to think like, man, I really can't find, it like, I remember it really started getting to me. So said something to my wife. So long story short, I think it was, sorry if my wife is listening, babe, I can't remember. It was either my birthday or Father's Day. I think it was Father's Day. And she ordered me one of those books where you put the person's name in it, pretending that you. Gotcha. And she gave me the book. She's all excited. And I'm looking at the book. And Stephen, I like to think I'm a pretty good looking guy. But the dude in the book looked like he was a model. And I'm looking at her like, this don't look like me. Like, I don't look that good. Like, I got bags under my eyes. I'm tired. I'm like, that guy ain't me. So my wife didn't like my joke, right? I'll kind of leave out some choice words she said. But she was like, you could write your own book if you think you could do better. And, I was like, sure, I'm going to write my own book. So I went in there, and I was sitting there at the kitchen table, and believe it or not, the idea just kind of came to me for the book or for the ideas for for several of the books. So I think the first one was I Want to Be a Lawyer. And I remember I started sketching it out. And I've always been a tinker, right, Stephen? I've always been like, if it's something I'm passionate about, I'll just really kind of look into it myself, start diving into it. So I remember in the book, for the listeners, all of the books start off where I'm sitting in my son's bedroom on the recliner that we used to have in there for him. And he's sitting on my lap. And it says, like, every night, I imagine what I want to be. But what folks don't realize is that recliner, even down to the blanket and the windowsill and everything, that's actually his room. That was like his original room setup. But I say that to say, as I was writing out the book, I was actually sketching out freehand what I wanted the pages to look like. And I remember after I had kind of sketched it out with the book, the first one, and I remember how I was like, this is actually pretty good. So my whole intent, Stephen, believe it or not, was to get that book packaged and published. And the same thing for the first couple, just to give to my son. That was kind of like going to be like our little special thing. And I had people like, hey, I really like the book. Can I get the book? And all right, sure. Well, we'll figure something out. And you blink your eyes several years later and fast forward, we've now got 7 books in the series.
Cool.
I just finished in the process, knock on wood, not putting my artist on the spot. They're finishing up the artwork to clean it up. But for the 8th book in the series, I Want to Be an Astronaut. And man, it's been amazing. It's really kind of become our thing, me and my son. He's now at the age now that he understands it. So what I mean by that, y'all, is, it really hits home when he's like, yeah, these are my books.
Nice.
Like, this is me.
Nice.
And I've even heard him say that to folks, like, yeah, this is me and my dad. Like, I'm going to be a lawyer, or I'm going to be a doctor. And you and I both know, Steve, you just don't hear kids saying that, right? It's very rare you hear 5-year-olds that are like, I want to be a veterinarian. Like, what? Be a veterinarian? But it's good because in the book, or in all the books, so for the listeners out there, if you're interested, I actually talk about the steps you need to become these careers. But I do it in a very, I don't want to use the word kid-friendly way, but I do it in a way where I put a rhyme on a lot of the words, and I make sure that the images tie into it, because I'm all about exposure, right? So not only are the kids hearing words and terms that they're like, oh, okay, they do this, but then most importantly, the other part that I love about it, Stephen, is parents are reaching out to me saying, I didn't realize that. Like, I didn't realize a kid had to take a law school admission test. I thought they could just become a lawyer. I mean, I've had people say that, and I say this with all love. Even people who are like very college educated, like folks are like, I didn't realize my kid wanted to do all that. Like, I know they need to be a lawyer, but I didn't realize they could do all that. So there's things that the book, like those unintended nuggets that have stemmed out of it. But yeah, man, I that one really is a passion project that really kind of spawned into something else. And it's definitely something that no matter, how many books I sell, even if I didn't sell anymore, like forever again, right? It's just something that I know I can give my son, and that he'll always have that. That's kind of like our special thing.
That is awesome. Love it. Matt, so before we leave, where can the listeners find more information about you, Leading Out the Woods podcast, your book, Leading Out the Woods, Nurturing School Etiquette for Success, and I Want to Be, and your other resources? Where can they go?
Man, the best thing to do, if you just go to my website, www.leadingoutthewoods.com. That's like my main hub. It'll take you to, my different social media links. There's a link on there, like you said, for all the books, for all the resources. There's a link on there for the I Want to Be series as well. But I like to tell my son, he got so popular, he got his own website as well. So if you go my website, it'll take you to his, or if you just want to go straight to the website to see little old Hilton at www.meet-hilton.com. It's kind of a landing page for all the books and all the things. And we're currently trying to work on some resources for different flashcards and stuff for the books that, knock on wood, hopefully will be available before the end of the year on the website as well.
Awesome. And I'll put that information in the show notes so it's easy for them to just click on and go straight there. So good stuff. I got one last question for you, Matt, and it goes like this. Do you have a teacher in your past who made a difference in your life? If so, who was it? And what would you say if given the chance to say thank you?
Great question, Stephen. That teacher would have to be Dr. Marianne Norman. She was actually one of my undergrad professors in college. She was the teacher ed program chair. I really just can't thank her enough. She changed my life. She is the reason I didn't drop out of the education program. She is the person who encouraged me when I was actually encouraged by a professor to drop out of the program because I didn't fit the mold of a teacher according to them. Her small interaction on the first day, y'all, that I met her caused me to cancel my meeting at the registrar's office to drop out. So I definitely have to thank her because she became an amazing mentor, still is a great mentor to this day when I'm able to, talk to her in between my crazy schedule all the time, because she's, retired, living her best life now. But I tell people, even at first, she didn't realize her small 3-minute conversation with me and the way she made me feel and the way she looked at me stopped me from going to a meeting that afternoon to drop out. Now, she didn't realize that until later when I had a, conversation with her, months later. But it shows you the power of a teacher. It shows you the power of seeing people, seeing potential, pulling that potential out of people. And I just don't know where I would be today without her. I mean, my whole career is obviously within education. So it really kind of chokes me up sometimes, man. It really has me think hard about, man, if I had just walked out of there and made that decision, I don't know where my life would be right now. So definitely shout out Dr. Dorn if you listen to this. I love you. Thank you for just inspiring, not only just inspiring me, but other folks through that amazing program. So thank you.
Awesome. Appreciate you sharing. Matt, thank you so much for sharing your book, Leading Out the Woods, Nurturing School Etiquette for Success, your podcast, Leading Out the Woods, your book series, I Want to Be, and your focus to assist educators. Awesome conversation. Wishing you the best in all you do.
I appreciate it, Stephen. Hey, man, thank you again for having me on here. As always, I appreciate you. Love your show. And if I can ever be of service, don't hesitate to reach out.
Hey, you have been listening to Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12, a podcast to help you help kids achieve their dreams. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is a member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is a member of the podcast network based in Canada called Voice Ed Radio. Voice Ed Radio, your voice is right here. The opinions expressed on Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 are those of the guests and host. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is intended to share ideas, advice, and suggestions. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is produced for educational purposes. Hey, thanks for listening. It would be awesome if you visited my website at stephenmiletto.com and connected with me, left a review, and listened to more episodes. And by the way, you could also share it with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues. Thanks so much. You're awesome.